like theoretical ways, or basically we get some hands-on experiences with the labs we do. But when we go out there in industry, the job environment, the work environment is slightly different from the college. It might be time to time harsh. The task and the responsibilities, the obligations are a lot more than like finishing the homework or working on a project at school with your friends. So things are going to be kind of different. And tonight here we are to kind of hear the difference between like an actual work environment and what we do here in college. So this is a pathway to get to that point, and we thought conducting this event can help you to kind of get a sense of how the future is. So we have the three amazing people here from industry that are in information technology field, and they can kind of share some of their experiences with you folks, and you can kind of better understand what to do, what type of, because as far as the field, IT, information technology, is a big umbrella. It's a big umbrella term, and you could choose so many different areas of practice in IT. So deciding which area to concentrate more and focus more is just a great thing. Sometimes you're interested in database, sometimes you're interested in cybersecurity, but you're not sure yet. This is absolutely okay. And perhaps tonight can help you to kind of decide about which area you can focus more. And we could get started. Thank you folks for being here. Should we start with you, ma'am?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Yep. My name is Holly Trego. I am currently the IT Solutions Manager at Eurofins for our Environmental Division. I don't know if any of you have seen Lancaster Labs or Eurofins. It's not too far from here, by about 40 minutes. I went to Penn Manor, then I came to Millersville. I had an older sister in the computer science program at Millersville, so that's kind of how I decided to come to Millersville. I'd come over, visit her, go to the computer lab, see what they were doing. I thought it was pretty cool. So I came to Millersville. I had a lot of good experiences. I think some of the things that I did that are really memorable, even 25 years later, were some of the working with some of the professors, getting to know some of them. If you work on a project if you have an opportunity, take it. I worked with Dr. Roger Webster a lot. He was a computer science professor here that's since retired. But we did virtual reality conference in Florida, and we just had opportunities where I could go and talk to people and just get a little bit of comfort presenting the work that I was doing. So that was a really good experience. Anytime you have an opportunity to talk to a professor, to work on a project, to get involved, it's important. That's one of the things that I always remember about Millersville. The other thing that I did when I was at Millersville was I went to the department that manages the internships, kind of helps you. So I really had no idea, how do I get into the IT field? I really don't have that much experience. I've taken a bunch of intro classes, but how do I get into it? So I went there, and they connected me with Lancaster Labs at the time. There was about 250 people at Lancaster Labs at the time. It was kind of a much smaller business than it is now. And I started with some very small programs. They would give me little things to do that were pretty well defined because I really didn't know much about what they were doing. I still remember sitting in meetings. The very first meetings I went to, I probably understood about 1/10 of the words that were spoken, not even the concepts. Lots of chemicals, lots of names, things that I didn't know. So you have to be ready for that. If you go into a position and you're going to probably feel a little overwhelmed if you try to get into the position at first, but everybody does. It's not something that you should be worried about. Definitely I would encourage you to do that. I started my internship after my sophomore year at Millersville. This summer I was going to just do a summer internship, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it there, and they let me stay on during the semesters. So a lot of times I'd be going in at 8 o'clock at night after all my classes are done, and I could work till midnight. I was a college student, especially in the IT field, they just let me get hours in whenever I can. They were right in the middle of rewriting a whole big system, so any hours anybody wanted to get in, you were pretty much able to do. So I stayed there for up until now, but I did move up. I worked pretty hard. I felt like I went in, I focused, I worked pretty hard at the job, and I moved up to a group leader position. And about 15 years ago, I started managing the group. I have about 10 people that I manage at Eurofins. So I have a whole kind of wide range of people that I work with. Some people have families and they want to work 8 hours and they don't, they will come on at 9 and they want to leave at 5 and they don't want to do anything outside of that time frame. And I think that's fine for some of those people. You just have to, some people have to set the expectations of what they want to do. I have other people that want the challenging projects that they know they're going to get calls in the middle of the night and things like that. So you can do pretty much anything you want to do. You just need to kind of think about it. I do a lot of work with databases. We do Oracle and SQL are the big ones that we do. SQL now finished. We kind of replaced most of our Oracle stuff recently with SQL. A lot of database programming. At Eurofins, we did some kind of cool things with the environmental testing. Some of the more memorable things would be we did air quality testing at the Pentagon after 9/11, things like that. So during the Gulf oil spill, we were testing a lot of the waters to make sure that the cleanup was going well, that they were getting the areas cleaned that they thought. Did a lot of testing on the oil to kind of say, where's this oil coming from? Is it really part of the spill that's showing up over here, or things like that. So yeah, I think we could maybe continue with everybody else's description of what they do, and then we can have some discussion.
Sure, we could come back to you. Thank you very much for sharing. So,
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ray Chustani. I live in New Jersey and I work in New Jersey. I've been in IT business and computer-related business for about 32 years. I started a long time ago, around 1990, where there was no internet. Everything was so basic. DOS. If you wanted to do something, you had to know the commands, and there were no hard drives in the beginning, floppy diskettes and so forth. So that was an interesting time, and there has been quite a lot of changes to the industry. And basically, the goal and the purpose for the industry when I started, we didn't have internet. It actually, we had some connection to areas where we could download drivers and everything with 1 or 2 megabyte per second phone connections, and very basic. So the goal back then was speed and capacity. There were really not much of an interaction between even computers, let alone companies, and like we have, downloading, interacting, inputting, networking, and whatnot. But right now, the industry has transitioned from that era, and the goal and purpose right now is security and interconnectivity of how to best do your job, connect, take advantage of the technology, but stay secure. And that's basically what we do. Small company, I was on my own. When I graduated from Middlesex County College, I worked for a company for a year, and then I decided I wanted to take a chance and start my own business. And I did. In the beginning, obviously it was not easy. I had a 1-bedroom apartment. My bench was in my room, my bedroom, and I was doing all my repairs and everything. But the one thing that I always have appreciated, and I think is important to emphasize on, is the opportunities that comes our way. Sometimes, if we don't pay attention to it and take advantage of it, it passes us by. And I had a couple of those. I made in the company that I worked, there were 2 gentlemen, 2 partners, and one of them was really good at hardware. You could give him a typewriter, and he could, with a blindfold, could just take it apart and put it back together in about an hour. The other partner, who's right now my own partner, one of my best friends, and we ended up actually working in parallel, and finally 3 years ago we merged our two companies. He was more software oriented, and so they had a very good influence in the way my entire career shaped. But obviously, you have to have the will and want to progress. This is a field that has a lot of opportunities, not only as a job, but it's really challenging. As they say, find a job that you like to do and you would never work a day in your life. There are a lot of opportunities. My own experience, I remember, for the first couple of years, when I started on my own, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to do networking, I wanted to do programming, this and that, and I was a little bit distracted, and that didn't work out well. I learned the hard way, so I decided I want to emphasize and concentrate on networking and be able to get good at it, and then move on to different field and kind of add to my experiences and everything. What you're all doing right now is really important. You're setting up the base for your future. Once you get out there, it's a little bit different, but experience comes with time. And if you look at trends of where the industry is going, first of all, you have to decide what part of this industry you're most interested in and you want to follow. Once you decide on that and you get good at it, then look at trends, what is going on. Right now in our own industry, we're looking for help. What we're looking for in the resumes are basic education and what other education or experience the techs have or the candidates have. AWS, Microsoft certification, those are really important, and it actually shows that not only the experience of the candidate is higher, but they are able to multitask and grow in different areas and whatnot. So these are very important things. And the one thing that may not be industry related, but I really believe on because it helped me greatly, is, and that is regardless of what you do, but especially in this field, in my experience and in my line of work, which may be different than the two other speakers, but managing time. You dedicate time for studying, to doing everything. Once you graduate, concentrate on managing time, be able to decide what you want to do, don't get distracted, and there's a lot of opportunity in this field. Right now we're hiring, just to give you an idea, we're looking for a candidate. We're starting with $70,000. That's the base for us to start tech on the road. What we do, almost 50%, 60% of what we do is remote. So you could work from the comfort of your own house with a secure computer. And another maybe third of it, a couple of hours, we do need, because we deal with smaller clients. We mostly deal with law firms, doctors' offices, accountants. We have small networks. We do manage a township in town of Westfield in New Jersey, and a couple of schools in Eastern PA. So we obviously deal with hardware, servers, and most of the time we're able to manage and resolve issues remotely, but sometimes you have to go on site. And we're looking for a couple of tech that could help us with this aspect of it and everything. But the starting point doesn't really, I mean, no one, I didn't have an experience. when I started. All the knowledge that I had is what I learned in college, but it's a little bit different. But it easily translates from, you know, the learning experience from college to work. It really is how, depends on the candidate or the person, how adaptive you are. And not get intimidated by or overwhelmed by what is out there. Because it really is so challenging and it's so interesting that I really look forward myself to start my day every day without having to, I mean, I have days, don't get me wrong, I have days where I could pull my hair and scream. I'm pretty sure you all have it too, but.
No. It's all good.
But it really is a very interesting field, and I'm privileged to be able to do something that I really like, because it does make a huge difference. And look at, opportunities are out there. If you really wanted to, a businessman I was talking to said something interesting to me. He says life is like a pyramid. The higher you go, the tougher it gets, but the more rewarding it is. So really, if you're really into it, if you put the time and effort, it's like an airplane. The first, you know, half an hour to get to the cruising altitude is the hardest. A couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years of hard work will get you the experience, the confidence that you need, and hopefully from there it just picks up, because the technology is evolving so much. I mean, it is just amazing to see from 1990s and where I started to right now, and there is no single day that I look at what is out there and wow, you know, what is coming down the pipe. So you've chosen a great field. That's it.
Talking about the difference from there to now, when I was a computer science major at Millersville, I didn't own a computer. I used the computer lab, yeah. Now some of my classmates had one, but they were kind of expensive back then.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so good evening. My name is Brian Hetzko. A little bit of a deviation from the other panelists in terms of my background and what I do. So I am the Director of Engineering at Ultra. If you're ever in the Lancaster area over in Hempfield, we're just right there. So now what we do at Ultra at this particular location is we build flight instrumentation and flight safety hardware, mostly for aircraft and missiles. It's pretty wild. You don't realize that this little building in Lancaster, across from Arby's, they're building parts that literally go on nuclear missiles. So I didn't know it, and I live 2 miles away from it. So one thing I want to talk and I want to touch on that I heard Ray mention was talking about, like, you know, adaptation and things like that as you go through your career. And I'll explain my career path and how I got here. But the adaptation part really kind of struck a chord with me, because there's a level of luck that also goes into how you build your career, but also making your own luck. And there's a lot of that, especially in this industry, is making your own luck as you go. And as I talk through my background, you'll kind of get where I'm coming from. So, as I mentioned, I'm the Director of Engineering at Ultra. I'm also, as I was mentioning, I'm an adjunct professor over at York College. I teach computer engineering there. I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years now. I absolutely love it. So my background is, going back to my education, I have an undergrad bachelor's in computer engineering from Lehigh University. And I'll start there. I love my university experience. I was a terrible student, and barely graduated. I am the first to admit, I am not ashamed. I graduated in 4.5 years with a 2.4. Okay? So I tell this to every one of my students because it's important to know that it's a grind. Education in a technology or advanced field, it's a grind. It's sometimes just getting there and sticking it out. It makes a big difference. And I've come a long way in my career from somebody who barely graduated. Okay? So fast forward, right? So it was a time in the world. This is like early 2000s, so 2000, 2001, where there was this thing called the tech bubble, or the .com bubble, where every company on earth was hiring everybody with a computer something in their degree. So it was an incredibly competitive job market. Almost the opposite now of what it is now, where they would just hire. There was just so much, right? But they were just snatching up everybody. But they didn't necessarily want the 2.4s, right? And so I ended up, or a friend of mine was working for the Army as an engineer in New Jersey, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Was the Center for Communications and Electronics. Turns out they had this cool internship program. I applied, and they were basically a warm body internship program. If you were in technology, you were in. So I got this cool offer to be an intern at a place called Intelligence and Information Warfare. I was like, that sounds cool. And so I was like, I can do that. So I went and did this internship with the Army. All my other friends were going getting internships with Intel, AMD, Lutron. And Lutron is a huge, Merck, all of these like giant companies. And they're like, you're gonna go work for the government? You can make so much more money elsewhere. I was like, they would hire me. I didn't tell them that, but that was the case. Okay, so I got this job. I went and worked, and because I thought it sounded cool. So I went and started working with them, and it turns out it didn't just sound cool, it was really cool. Okay, so we're talking 2001. A lot of stuff happened. Some of you probably weren't even born. But September 11, 2001 happened, and all of a sudden, being in the intelligence community for the Army was pretty important. So it not only was a cool job, it also became very, very important. And I found myself in the middle of a fight with a different purpose. Find your purpose. Don't just work. Don't just work to get paid. Find a purpose. And when I had that, I was lucky enough to have that right out of school. I was actually technically still an intern. Okay? So first thing, find a purpose. Doesn't have to be paychecks, but kind of love what you do. Right? You don't have to love it, but have a purpose. So turns out I have this cool job. I'm working in intelligence. I was on the Joint IED Defeat Task Force. So all the cool counter IED stuff that was happening at the time, I was involved in all that. Actually did very, very well. And I ended up, as a result of the connection with the government, I was able to get into a graduate program. So I actually was able to go, I probably wouldn't have gotten accepted to any graduate program with my undergrad degree. Got a graduate, went to Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey, not the Stevens here in Lancaster, very different. Got my master's degree in communication signal processing because I was doing signals intelligence, which was we were finding and locating communications. So I found that I really had this niche for signals and signal processing. Turns out when you find a purpose, you can do really well. So I did very differently in my master's program to the point where I actually got accepted into the PhD program. Started working on my PhD. So I educationally took quite a turn, right? And so I like to tell that story because I think, especially if students are feeling like they're not sure they're cut out for it, or maybe it's not, you know, they don't have what it takes. Let's face it, technology's hard. If it wasn't, you know, it wouldn't progress. You know, as long as you find that purpose, you can stick with it. So fast forward, I leave the government. What I find out as I'm leaving, the second from my last day, the guy who hired me said, "Brian, I'm so glad to see everything, this great stuff you're doing." I was there for like 9 years. So proud of you. You know, so glad I hired you. He's like, "Do you know why I hired you?" I said, "No, Bob, why?" And he goes, "You know it wasn't your grades. You remember, 9 years. 9 years later, he remembered my grades." He said, "You know it wasn't your grades." I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "It's because on your resume, you said you were a bartender." No lie. It's 'cause I was a bartender. And he's like, and he goes, "Because I could tell from talking to you that you were a relatively smart guy, but you knew how to deal with people." Okay? So that's my second part of advice. Just figure out your way of dealing with people. Right? Deal with people. And that's kind of the other side of the coin. Find the purpose and figure out your way of dealing with people. I know I manage 30 engineers. My previous job, I managed 45 engineers. Every engineer deals with people differently. Some of them don't like people, but the ones that are successful figure out how they can interact with people. So figure out your way, figure out your method. It'll serve you very well. You don't have to be a bartender, but figure out your way. And ultimately that is what served me in my career. Once I got past the relatively short time doing development, I started my career doing coding. I was doing programming of signal processing. I started doing project management, technical project management, advanced research and development. And then I went to a company called SRI, which you probably have never heard of, but you know their stuff. It's one of those companies, like if anybody has an Apple, then you have Siri. You know, Siri is based on SRI. It's a spin-off of SRI. They were the company that developed the AI that became Siri. Kind of cool. They also developed the mouse, color TV, a lot of important stuff. Really cool company. So I worked for them for a few years. Then I went down to Maryland and I worked for Textron Systems. So I was commuting from here, Lancaster, all the way down to just north of Baltimore for a couple of years. I worked in unmanned systems. Another big field, right? UAVs, drones, whatever you want to call them. Unmanned surface vessels, boats, unmanned ground vehicles, essentially robot tanks. Worked on it all, touched all of it at some point in time. I was a chief engineer for a number of years, and I was a program manager for a few years in all those different areas. So talking about the different applications of some of the things you're learning, all of those UXV, whatever kind of unmanned vehicles that I was working on, I mean, the technology involved in those products is astounding, and every little piece requires somebody with a different perspective and just different piece of expertise. It's not one person designing everything or putting everything together or testing everything. You have to have this holistic team, and the things that you guys are talking about here, cybersecurity. Oh my God, I dealt with the military, huge. Right? Everything was cybersecurity. I was on the other side of it too, trying to break it, but that's a whole other story. Cyber, machine learning. If you have machine learning, I think they're developing some machine learning and AI and data science, whatever you want to call it, right? I had this argument with my daughter that data science and machine learning are the same thing. She didn't believe me. So data science is massive right now. Predictive analytics. When you have an unmanned vehicle that's 50 miles away from where you're at, it's got to be able to tell what's going wrong. That's data science. It's got all these sensors, all the data comes together, the data gets processed, and that aircraft or that boat or that tank has to figure out that I've got something going wrong because I don't have a driver. You're not driving it. You don't feel that shudder. You don't feel that squeak. You don't hear the squeak in your brakes, right? There's all that kind of stuff that we take for granted in this world of unmanned systems. That all is hugely important. So that's where all of this kind of comes together in a very different kind of way than what we've than what some of the other panelists. So I'm more on the researchy side of things, the more development engineering, but I interact with folks that are and work with folks that are doing the network design, the system design, the machine learning, the data science, the cybersecurity, all of that. When you're putting together and designing systems, you have to take all that into account. So it becomes super important. As far as what we kind of roles, I mean, we're looking for everything in terms of the industry. Cyber is huge, especially in a military contractor world. Cybersecurity is a huge thing, and data science. I would say those two are probably the two biggest for us right now, because the more sensors we're dealing with, the more data we're dealing with. So we've got an entire Ultra as a company, not just the small division here that's in Lancaster. As a company, we have an entire division called REMI, which is Resilient Machine Learning. It's an acronym within an acronym. Our Resilient Machine Learning Institute. so it's a stretch, but we've got an entire division that does nothing but machine learning. So they get hard problems from their customers, and they have a team of data scientists that work on it. And we're constantly working with them on stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Okay. Amazing work you have done. So thank you for sharing. These are amazing, great success stories. Now, here's the thing. Let's move on to fast forward, as Brian mentioned. Fast forward to the end of the college before you start your career. Now, as far as the perspective as an employment, you're the employee, folks are seeking employment, you're the employers, and seeking for perfect candidates. Now, let's talk about details. If you're interviewing somebody, what sort of criteria you're looking for from the candidates? That's just hold this thought and these sort of thoughts, and then I'm going to add this to it, because some students are complaining that, you know what, most of these job descriptions stating that I gotta have job experiences, but right now, yes, I've gone through internship. Internship is the ideal situation that you folks have gone through internship. But what if they don't have internship, or even though if they have internship, still the job experiences that these companies looking for, the students don't have it yet. So what can they do to get to that point? So that's another thing that I like you folks to answer, or at least kind of share your experiences. And maybe I add one last thing to it, and then you could kind of address all that together. As far as the little details during the interview process, because recently I have spoken to 2 companies in the region, and we had a back and forth discussions, and the person said, you know what, sometimes the students are not dressing professionally, or they're not speaking professionally, or they're just very nervous, or they're kind of a way that we could tell from the first 5 minutes of discussion that this is not a good, suitable candidate for us, and we'll move on to the next applicant. So maybe these sort of details from your own perspective, from your own mind, how would you see this? And what are your expectations as a person, as a company, interviewing students? what are you expecting them to carry or have, to present, to kind of dazzle out? And you say, you know what, this is the candidate I want to hire. So what sort of resume that they should have to dazzle out on your desk? And you say, I want to have this person. So back to
Yeah, I've looked through a lot of interviews. I've hired a number of people, and I was actually surprised at the number of applicants I got that had no experience coming out of college. So they were looking for a full-time job, and in a lot of cases had no jobs. And that was kind of a red flag for me, because I'm like, will they show up? Will they be able to work from 9 to 5?
Mm-hmm.
Have they ever sat for 8 hours straight and done something? So like summer jobs are great, or anything you can do to just kind of show that you can be responsible, that you can, like, you know, I'm a little nervous if I'm
Sure.
gonna have to hire somebody for the first time. For an internship, it's a little different. I think when we hire for interns, it's more about, you know, are you involved in any activities? Are you, you know, like my internship, I think the reason I got the internship was because I did the stats for basketball, for the women and men's basketball team. And the person who interviewed me, huge basketball fan. We spent about 15 minutes of the half-hour interview talking about basketball. So it was just kind of like, just having that on-campus job, that was like, you know, I just went to the games, you know, I loved watching basketball, so I got to watch the games, do the stats, and that's pretty much what got me my first internship. So it's just getting involved, having some things that you're interested in that you can then talk about during the interview, I think is important. And honestly, the skills for me haven't been quite as important. Like, if I have seen you take a database class and you can talk to me about the concepts of the database, I don't necessarily care that you know Oracle, even if that was what I was trying to hire someone for. If you knew SQL or you knew another database language and you can talk about the concepts, then that's okay. I can teach somebody a new language, but I can't teach them how to learn a language. You know, like, that's a skill that is hard. Not everybody can do that. So if they've done something similar, then you can translate that. So I would say just get involved in some activities, do things in the community around what you're doing. I know there's a Millersville student who is helping with my daughter's robotics team. I mean, that's a great experience for him. He wants to do robotics. He's helping the community. He's, you know, for him to go into an interview and be able to say something like that, that's going to be valuable. So you want to kind of find something like that that you can put down that would be interesting, that gives you something to talk about during the interviews. I've also had interviews where I've had those situations where somebody came in and I know the person's nervous, but that's what we're asking them to do, to come in and work with people all day long. The one person didn't look at me once. They looked off to the side the entire interview, and it was like, okay, you know, it was just kind of awkward. So just, you know, talk to the person like they're a person. We're the same people. They're not. You don't have to be so nervous. Just talk to the person, look at them. You know, focus on what you have to say. Try to get to yourself and promote yourself. At an interview, you kind of have to talk about yourself and try to talk up, you know, your experiences, find common things that we would want to hear.
So if I want to summarize the things you mentioned, first is students going to be active in the community. Try to find things that you can somehow contribute to the society, to the community, to the campus, perhaps campus activities, events like this that you just attended it. Start talking to people, build up connections and networking. And then the other one is like having self-esteem in front of other people. We're all the same people. Perhaps one is capable of doing something better than the other, but at the end, we're all human beings. So start to kind of build up this, I would say, teamwork sort of a skill, or communication. So communication is the key. And you got to present yourself time to time and say, hey, I am good, I can do it, yes, I can do it. So yeah, I guess these are highlights of what you mentioned, right? Thank you very much. Ray, what do you think? Like, which sort of process do you go through to hire people? Like, what sort of candidate? Like, you mentioned that you're currently seeking for good applicants to start working for your company.
That is correct.
Yeah.
A great friend once told me happiness lays on the other side of fear, and that is so true. in life, we have to take steps and to make a change, to make a significant change for ourselves and or others. And this not having experience or hesitation sometimes actually causes for us to miss opportunities. So I think self-confidence when I'm working on what to do, computer science and whatnot, that's the most important part of it. Right now, we're interviewing, given COVID for the last couple of years or so, we have had some technicians. We hired someone who looked very promising, but he came and afterward he quit after 4 months. And I was telling my partner, because we had a phone interview, he had an interview with him, we both jointly had a phone interview with him. And right now, when we're again in a hiring process, and I told him, I said, that doesn't work because you need to look at the person and be able to see their interaction. What I do for a living is really very important. I mean, COVID was, first few months of COVID were tremendously hard for me. Because even if I had service calls that I could do remotely, I would get out at 6:30 in the morning, come back at 6, 7 o'clock at night. The best part of my day was interacting with clients and just the drive in between and everything. To me, what you do is probably 45, 50%. Your knowledge of what you do is 40, 50% of the whole equation. The rest of it is how you do it, and if you're enjoying it, and if you're making something of it, and you're trying to grow. So it's self-confidence, building yourself to a point where if somebody else could do it, I could do it too. There's no doubt that I could do it. This will help you not only be more confident, but then settle down and spend your time growing and looking at other areas and be more observant. That's the biggest part of it. As I said, I'd rather interview someone and take a look at them, to look at their face and their interactions and everything, because it's important. As she mentioned, when you talk to someone, if they don't look at you, they don't look into your eyes, or kind of act shy and whatnot, that is something that automatically raises suspicion. What may be wrong? So self-confidence, it's we're all human, regardless of what we do. I'm going to tell you a story. In the company that I worked for a year, I had no knowledge. Actually, it was not my job anyway, but I had no knowledge of printers. I never forget that. The partner that actually was managing the hardware and everything sent me on a service call to a law firm to take a look at the printer that was having problem. I went to this law firm, stood in front of this white box for like 10 minutes. I didn't even know how to open up the cover. And it was so funny, I'll never forget it. But I ended up, after shaking a little bit, I ended up opening the cover and trying to resolve the issue. I wasn't able to, but I did give it a try. And he knew pretty much what he was doing. He was kind of testing me to see how far I would go and when I would stop and ask for help. And I did. For like half an hour, I was there looking at different areas and everything, and he came by and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to figure out what the problem is." I didn't tell him, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Come help," and everything. I said, "I'm trying to figure out what the problem is here." Although I never ever had worked on a printer. Or I could give you many examples of different experiences where I went on service calls and took responsibilities and took on things that I really didn't have any knowledge, but I had the courage of it to do it. And that stood out. That really stood out and brought me up to the rank in what I was doing within the year. And not only that for the company, but brought me up in my own rank. and gave me the confidence that although living a comfort of a paycheck and having social benefits and everything, medication benefits and everything, was really hard. But I was young, I was energetic, and I said, worst comes to worst, I'm gonna give it a try for a few years. It doesn't work, I'm gonna go back work for somebody else. So I took the chance. It doesn't mean right now the industry is changing. Right now, our industry is challenging as well in being a smaller business, because companies like Microsoft, Amazon, bigger companies are coming up with technologies where local servers and LAN and those type of